Thank you for tuning in to All Things Real Estate. Once again, here are your hosts, Brad Avergon and Gary Kelley.
Welcome back to the second half of All Things Real Estate. I'm Gary Kelley, and that's Brad Avergon, at least the last time we chatted. And we're talking today about someone that, has been in their house for a while, and they're bursting at the seams, and what do they do about it? And, I see it in people either trying to do improvements to the house because they've decided if they're going to stay, they're going to fix it up a bit. I want to say put lipstick on the pig, and often the renovations are far more involved than that. And Brad, you've got experience with people that want to literally add an addition or blow out the side or whatever.
Yeah, so a lot. So we were talking about the two segments of the market that seem to be active in the first half of the show. You were talking about the part that you're seeing is the folks that maybe inherited a property. The heirs are now looking to sell the property. And that seems to be a group that is, there's a lot of those homes coming up these days. The other part that I'm seeing is folks that have been in their home maybe a few years. They've maybe grown their family, gotten a couple of kids, maybe a dog, and now they're kind of busting at the seams. So they're in a position because it's literally becoming uncomfortable living. Like, it's very, very hard, especially and now where people oftentimes work, if not all week, part of the week from home. And so having that tight quarters really becomes cumbersome. So they're looking at options, and they're looking at doing a number of things, looking at adding a second floor or blowing out the side or the back to try to expand the footprint of the property. And it's definitely worth going through that exercise. But I've gone through it with a number of clients. And one of the things that I find is once, and again, this is one of those things that because we were talking about what sounds really good, in the beginning, when you start looking at the dollars and cents, it's often not as good of an idea as it seemed in the beginning. And what I mean by that is the cost to construct an addition is expensive. It's more than people think that it's going to be. And so when we sit down and I walk them through the exercise, and I walk them through 2 points of it. The first thing I say is, okay, let's talk about what would you need to add? How much square footage would you need to add? Would you need to add baths? Are you upgrading your kitchen? Or what do you need to do? So these are the needs. All right. Now, let's get a ballpark idea. I'm not talking about a detailed quote. I'm talking about talk to a couple of contractors, get a ballpark idea within a $50,000 to $100,000 radius. How much are we talking to do this?
Right.
And then once they have that, I say, okay, now we can look at ways to finance that. But before we even do that, if we take the cost, let's say the addition is going to be $200,000. If we take the cost of that $200,000 and we add it to the current value of your home, would it sell for that today? Would it be worth that today? Because if it's not, if you're just adding convenience space, then perhaps maybe you should look at selling your home, netting that equity, and then buying another property. And so that exercise has people kind of going back and forth a little bit. And it's been very valuable for folks. They've started with me like, we're definitely building. We've gotten our 3 quotes. We've got this. And then when I walk them through that other exercise, they start scratching their heads. They're saying, yeah, you might be right. Am I going to get my money back? And maybe not only am I going to get my money back, but if you think about, where are you going to live when this addition's being put on? If you have kids, it's more than a lifestyle. It can be dangerous. You may have to leave the property. You have to live somewhere, and they can take 6 to 12 months to do an addition like that. So there's a lot of provocative questions that I bring into the conversation that force them to think. And I kind of leave them with the questions, and then we regroup like a week later and say, okay, what do you think? What are your, and we kind of go through the process. But it's I think a lot of folks are faced with that right now.
So one of the things that I've seen, and I'm not trying to denigrate an industry, but one of the things I see with construction is it always goes longer than the intent. Okay. Someone says, oh yeah, we can blast through, we can redo this kitchen, and it'll take us 3 weeks. You need to plan 4 or 5, not because the people are not competent, but it takes time to get your parts in, whatever you need. And then inspections are also something that you don't always control. You've got to call the town, have them come out. And I know in some towns, resources in the inspectional services area are shared with other towns. And so it's a much more involved time frame. Not that the actual work at the property is more involved. It's just that they aren't sitting there waiting for your call.
Yeah, I would agree. Things typically, not sometimes, typically will take longer than they're estimating. Sometimes as much as twice as long, and so you do need to be prepared for that, both physically and mentally and financially, and you have to look at that and kind of weigh that into your equation. The other thing that you have to look at is when you're assessing the work that needs to be done. We talked about this. How are you going to finance it? Are you going to pay for it out of savings? Have you accumulated that? That's an option. That's going to keep you can retain your existing mortgage and be comfortable with that if you've been able to save that kind of money. But most people are not in that position. Most people have to finance it. So there's different types of ways you can do that. There's some situations where you can keep your current mortgage, and if you have enough equity in your home, your current home as it is today, not what it's worth in the future, but as it is today, you can go get an equity line of credit, which is interest only. There's usually no points, no fees associated with that. And it can be good for, I think, small renovations. I get a little concerned when people start doing major renovations like additions and things like that, because it is a variable rate of interest that has no cap on it, so to speak.
So it's not tied to your original note interest rate.
Not at all tied. So you've got your regular mortgage that stays in place. This is a second mortgage that's interest only for 10 years. There's called a draw period that you can draw on it, and then it converts over to a principal and interest, again with a variable rate. I like to use or recommend an equity line when somebody's maybe thinking about doing a bathroom, anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000. You can kind of control it. Most people can afford, if rates swing up or swing down, they can do that. And $50,000 is a number that typically they can digest to do what I recommend, which is to pay down that 50,000 over the next 10 years. Make a plan to do that.
Right.
If it's something, a bigger renovation, and they have the equity, they can take out a fixed second mortgage on their property, which will enable them to kind of have a fixed payment that will go out over a period of time. Those are higher interest rates than you would see on your first mortgage right now, but it is definitely something they can rely upon. That's going to be a fixed monthly payment, and it has a termination. They're paying principal and interest every month. If they don't have sufficient equity, as the property stands today, they can do what would be equal to what's called a major renovation or a construction loan, where we as bankers use the future improved value of the property. So what the property would be worth per the plans and specs that you're building to, if it were completed today, what would it be worth? And we use that as a value, and then we base our loan off of that. But when they do that, part of that process is when we close on that type of construction or renovation loan, we pay off their current first mortgage, and now the entire amount is on that higher interest rate construction renovation loan. So there's a lot of different options, and I don't really expect people to kind of digest them all. I kind of guide them through the process based on what they're telling me. Based on, I'll ask them some of the questions that I've just brought up. What's the value of the property today? Do you have equity? What's the cost of the renovation? What's your timeline? All of these sorts of things. And I'll kind of guide them through the process. And we'll look at a number of different options to make sure we find the right one that fits their situation financially and personally.
What I find interesting is people go out and they say, oh, I've got to get estimates. Well, yeah, there are some tools out there in the construction industry that allow them to pretty well dial in what a bathroom's going to cost. Now, yes, if you decide to do gold-plated fixtures, it's going to drive the cost up. But a basic bathroom, yes, there's a difference between a fiberglass tub insert and a tiled approach. But those things, construction people can get their arms around pretty quickly. And so the whole, I got to go back and I got to look at this, I got to run number, they know. They know as they stand there often what the cost is going to be.
Right. But the other thing is that we build in there is, there's a difference between when you're building new construction and you're starting with dirt and when you're renovating a property, because when you start opening up walls, you never know what you're going to find, and there's oftentimes wood rot or other damage that we have to, as bankers, we have to guide our clients and say, you have to prepare for this. Hopefully you won't need that, but when we do a construction or renovation loan, I typically like to build in anywhere from 10 to 20% in overrides, simply because when you open up that wall, number one, you don't know what you're going to find. The other thing is that when you get that quote from your contractor, that ballpark quote that you're talking about, that may be your Home Depot or your Lowe's line of puck lighting, they call it, or whatever. If you want something special, as you said, the special brass fixtures or something in the bathroom, you got to budget for that. I see it more when it comes to kitchen renovations than I even do in bath, because you can, there's such a variance in the cost of, if you're replacing your stove, if you're replacing your sink, you're replacing your faucet, all of these, refrigerator, huge difference.
There's a difference between a basic, I'm going to say GE, I'm not even sure if they make stoves anymore, but a basic GE stove and the Wolf high-end, multi-burner, all that. Brad, how can someone reach you to continue the conversation?
Best way to reach me, Gary, is via my cell phone, which is 978-375-5531, or they can email me at brad@bradavergon.com. And Gary, how do they reach you?
I am Gary Kelley with Cassidy Realty Group. I can be reached at 508-733-6005 or Gary@movewithgary.com. Brad, I want to thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Always enjoyable.
Enjoy what's left of this summer day and the summer month. We'll see you again in August.
All right. Sounds like a plan.
Bye now.
Once again, thank you for watching All Things Real Estate. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Brad or Gary.